Now both of these phones are basically mid-range Android devices. The HTC Status has an 800 megahertz processor, and the Pantech crossover has a 600 megahertz processor. Now, you know, the number doesn't always tell you how well the phone is going to perform, but when comparing both of these phones, the Status definitely performed much better. I really didn't have any problems at all with lag or with it being slow, you know, things being choppy, whereas with the crossover, I did have that problems. The screen was just sometimes unresponsive, as you can see. A lot of this is because I believe the crossover has a thicker screen, possibly Gorilla Glass, and so a lot of times when you have a thicker display, it sometimes has problems with responsiveness, but that doesn't change the fact that it's just unresponsive a lot. There's times when it's laggy. You know, I can go to the menu, you can see scrolling is just kind of choppy, and then I want to go back home, and sometimes this will take a while to load, or whenever I want to unlock it, you can see there's kind of just, you know, a little lag here and there. And then if I go to, actually I'm going to go to the web browser, and then we'll take a look at pinch to zoom and kind of just see how that works. But, you know, overall I can tell you that the processor on the Status definitely performed much better than the processor on the, that ships with the crossover. PhoneDog.com, enter. Now in terms of 3G speeds, you know, both of these phones are on AT&T. Let me get that to rotate. Both of these phones are on AT&T, so 3G speeds are going to be very similar, and a lot of that is going to depend on coverage in your area. I've personally tested both of these phones in the Dallas area, in different parts of the Dallas area. Obviously the 3G speeds have been the same. I've gotten highs of, you know, 1.4 megabits per second for downloads, and then I've had times when I get, you know, 3 or 200 kilobits per second. So it's been kind of inconsistent, but both phones have been about the same. And again, it's going to depend largely on coverage in your area. So if I zoom in here, it's still kind of loading, so we'll give it some leeway. Maybe I can just stop it from loading. There we go. So you can see it's not too bad. Let me get it at a better angle. Not too bad once we get down to pinching and zooming, and I do have, I believe there's Flash content loaded on this site. So it's slightly choppy, but really nothing to complain about. And then on the Status, I have to do it at an angle because there's a tripod right here, and so I have to reach my hand around. On the Status, it is a lot more smooth. Now again, this is nothing to, a nice view there. I got it right on her legs. Excellent, Sydney. Okay, so you know, definitely nothing to complain about, even though the Status is slightly faster. It's not like the crossover did terribly. But I can say from experience, after doing tests with the processors and speed tests and just comparing overall performance, the Status just did much better, little to no lag, whereas with the crossover gave me a lot of problems with lag, and again the screen was unresponsive a lot. Now if we flip both of these phones over, and let me lock the display, or lock the screen. You can see the camera. The Status has a 5 megapixel camera and an LED flash. The crossover has a 3 megapixel camera and no flash. Now they do both have an autofocus, which is nice, but you know, obviously a 5 megapixel autofocus camera with a flash. I'm very impressed for a mid-range phone to have a camera, at least with those numbers, you know, not even talking about performance, but at least with those numbers, very impressive. You know, when you consider the price of the phone, you're definitely getting a lot more than what you pay for, whereas with the crossover, 3 megapixels, you know, personally I think Pantech could have done much better. And even if we go over to, I'll show you a picture, and you might not be able to tell on camera, but picture quality on the Status is just a whole lot better than on the crossover. Okay, so here we have a picture. It's the same picture taken from the same angle. You can see that the crossover is a little brighter than the picture taken by the Status. However, if we zoom in on, get some details, and I'll get the same part on the Status, and then wait for it to load. You might not be able to tell this from the camera, or maybe you can, but the status is very clear. Even zoomed in this closely, I can still see details on the tip of this marker, on the lid. Very detailed, not very blurry. Again, it is grainy because it's a mid-range phone, so the camera isn't excellent. If you were to compare this to other cameras on a high-end phone, it would not be as good. But compared to what you get with the crossover, where this is blurry, more grainy, it's just not very good picture quality compared to the status. It's just much better. Now, you know, colors are a little different. Like I said, the crossover is brighter, but overall picture quality on the status is so much better. Video capture quality is not good on either phone. The status does have an advantage because it has a front-facing camera. The crossover doesn't. But video capture with their rear-facing cameras, not good on either one. Pretty much terrible quality. The status has better sound quality when capturing video, but even then, video capture isn't very good. But camera, definitely the status wins that one. Now, again, if we go to the back of the phone, we'll take a look at the battery. If I can get the battery cover off. Oh my gosh, I did it! So the Pantech crossover, it ships with a 1500 milliamp hour battery, and I might not be able to get this off. No, it's impossible to get off. I talked about this in the review for the status. This battery cover is just, it's horrendous. So yeah, we're not going to get that off. But the status ships with a 1250 milliamp hour battery. So, you know, judging by the numbers, 1250 to 1500, you think the crossover has a definite advantage. The difference is that the crossover has a larger display, so it has a lot more to do, whereas with the status, it's a smaller display. So 1250 may seem kind of puny, but it's really not, because that smaller display, you don't really need, I mean, having a larger battery would be nice, but you don't really need one. Now, in terms of battery life, the crossover has very inconsistent battery life. While on standby, I've tested it, it can last about 2-3 days on standby. The status also has excellent standby time. It can also last about 2-3 days on standby. However, with the crossover, once I start using it, battery life was very, very poor. In fact, I would be surprised if you got a full day of use from the crossover. Now, the status doesn't have excellent battery life, and you probably will not get a full day out of it. You may get a full day depending on how heavily you use it. With me, you know, normal use of emails, Twitter, and then having widgets running in the background, I barely made it through a full day. And so you might not get a full day out of it. However, it definitely lasted longer than on the crossover. Battery life on the crossover was very disappointing. Again, you know, this is Pantech's first attempt at an Android smartphone, at least in the US. So maybe just a couple of things to learn in terms of power management, because battery life was pretty terrible on the crossover. Now again, back underneath the battery cover, I shouldn't have put it back on. You can see the micro SD card slot there, and it ships with a 2 gig card. You can see that, and it supports, with the crossover, it supports up to 32 gigs, and the status also ships with a 2 gig card. I can't show you because, like I said, I can't get the battery cover off. It also ships with a 2 gig card, and you can, again, it supports up to 32 gigs. So, you know, in terms of memory, it's the same. Unfortunately, you do have to take off the battery cover, and you have to take out the battery in order to get to the micro SD card on the status. That's a pain because, you know, like I've said, it's impossible to get the cover off. But then again, you know, how many times do you actually have to access your SD card? Not very often, so not a huge deal. But both of them, you do have to take the battery cover off. So that's pretty much it, guys. The status versus the crossover. I can tell you, after testing both of them out, the status is a better phone. You know, when it comes to the keyboard, that's kind of just personal preference, but the Status does have an excellent keyboard. The display is also much more responsive, and the processor, the overall performance of the phone was much better, is excellent, little to no lag, whereas the crossover gave me all kinds of problems with an unresponsive screen. For whatever reason, you know, even if it is because it has a thicker screen, it still just is, you know, more unresponsive, and I had a lot of lag. The design, again, personal opinion, but HTC generally has pretty good hardware designs. Sense is an excellent UI, very well refined, and they've done a great job of making it work on this small display. So if you're worried about that, you know, there are some apps, like I said during the video, that will be portrait only. But overall, HTC has done an excellent job of really customizing their UI to really work on this small display. It wasn't just, you know, they took full-on Android and just scrunched it onto a tiny display. They really made it work despite the small display. So Sense is a great UI and very popular. It's probably the most popular UI, so you're probably safer with choosing Sense. Again, camera quality, the pictures taken with the Status were just so much better. 3G speeds, those are going to be about the same. They're both on AT&T, and it's going to just depend on coverage in your area. So overall, Status is a better phone in my opinion. You can check out both of them at your local AT&T store to see which one you prefer. You know, maybe you like having the larger display. Maybe the keyboard on the crossover suits you more. So you can go check them out, but thanks guys for watching this video. I'm Sydney from PhoneDog.com. Be sure and keep it on PhoneDog for more news, updates, and reviews on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page. We're always having giveaways, so keep it there. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, if you're into that sort of thing, my screen name is It's My Job to Know. You can ask me any questions, and I'll try to answer. I try to answer as many as I can. So thanks guys for watching this Dogfight crossover versus Status. I'm Sydney from PhoneDog.com, and I'll see you guys later.